Tonight, the confirmed death toll rises again in Joplin, Missouri, officially making this the deadliest year for tornadoes on record. I'm Russ Mitchell. Also tonight, hitting the road. More Americans are traveling this Memorial Day weekend than last, but high gas prices are keeping them closer to home. Special families, the widows and orphans of Special Forces units, who rarely are told how their loved ones died in battle, are now receiving the help they need. And Indy Centennial, a view from the Speedway as the Indianapolis 500 turns 100.
This is the CBS Evening News with Russ Mitchell.
And good evening. As we approach the 1 week mark of the Joplin, Missouri tornado, the death toll there continues to rise. The latest count, 139 dead. Nationwide, 520 people have died in tornadoes in 2011, making this the deadliest year for tornadoes since 1950, the first year precise records were kept. In Joplin today, the search for survivors continued, and there were even a few smiles. Ben Tracy is in Joplin tonight with the very latest. Ben, good evening.
Good evening, Russ. You know, it's been 6 days since the tornado hit here, and so much of this city still looks like this. But if you're looking for a sign of hope, check this out. Today, they actually put the roof on what is one of the very first buildings rebuilt here in Joplin.
These are the sounds of resilience. Just 3 days after the tornado, Darren Collins decided it was time to get moving.
We're trying to do what we can to get the girls back to work.
His wife's beauty salon was cut down by the twister.
You get yours dead on its top.
Now it's growing again.
I see a lot of people standing around staring at their rubble, and at some point we're going to have to roll up our sleeves and start throwing stuff out of the road and move on with our lives.
Some are moving on the hard way. Today, 59-year-old Dean Wells was laid to rest. He died in his orange apron when the tornado tore through the town's Home Depot.
I'm glad to have it. Wish it was him. I wish it was him.
But even as one life ends, a new one together begins today in Joplin.
It seems like there's been a lot of obstacles thrown in our path, but we finally made it.
Aaron Cox and Brooke Watson were high school sweethearts. Aaron shot this video last Sunday as they frantically ran through the streets of Joplin, searching for his sister.
It was just pure chaos.
They found her and also grabbed Brooke's wedding dress from the tailor on Main Street. They're getting married today. They thought about canceling, but decided this is just what their town needs.
I think it's just everybody's ready to do something happy. You know, we had half the people helping us out in the church lost their houses. My sister, her brother, a bunch of our people attending the wedding, and everybody wanted to do it.
Because Joplin is already showing it can shoulder even the heaviest of loads.
We're going to rebuild, and it has to start somewhere.
And they're planning to rebuild this one pretty quickly, just 45 days. But in a sign of some of the difficulties they're dealing with here, they're actually waiting on their electrician because he lost his home in the storm. Russ?
Ben Tracy in Joplin, Missouri. Thank you very much. President Obama travels to Joplin tomorrow for a first-hand look at the devastation. Today, the president concluded his European trip with a visit to Warsaw, Poland, where he reaffirmed U.S. support for democratic movements overseas. 3 people sustained minor injuries late today when a Delta Airlines jet blew a tire and suffered a landing gear fire upon landing in Atlanta. None of the injured required hospitalization. It is Memorial Day weekend, the unofficial start of summer. That means many Americans are hitting the highway. But this holiday, gas prices are up by more than $1 a gallon from a year ago. Terry McCarthy has the story of the new rules of the road.
It is pretty simple math. When gas prices go up, consumers have less money to spend elsewhere. For many this holiday weekend, that means skimping on vacations.
On weekends like this, don't go as far and stay locally because of the expensive gas prices.
Last month, the average family spent $369 on gas, a huge hike from the $201 average in April 2009. These days, families spend more on filling their tanks than they spend on cars, clothing, or recreation. A complete reversal from last year.
Some people are going to be taking shorter trips. On average, travel spending is down about $100 compared to last year.
Political instability in the Middle East and speculation in oil futures have contributed to the high cost of gasoline and have led to 8 straight weeks of falling demand for gas here in the U.S. Economists say gas prices should drop by another 30 cents or so in the coming weeks to about $3.50 a gallon. But for many drivers, even that is way too high. Terry McCarthy, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Vice President Joe Biden said today the Obama administration's auto industry bailout plan brought the industry back from, quote, the brink of extinction. But analysts say there are still many miles to go, as Tony Guida explains.
Like a driver caught in rush hour gridlock, the U.S. auto industry is making progress toward recovery, but it's a frustrating ride.
The industry's been like a patient on life support. They've been getting better and better, but then they keep getting colds as well.
From Japan, where an earthquake in March heavily damaged the nation's ability to produce cars and auto parts. And from Main Street, where consumers are struggling to keep their jobs and their homes. But the industry does have reason to jump for joy. This flashy opening of a new Volkswagen plant in Tennessee this week, and with it, 2,000 new jobs. GM's recent decision to add a third shift at its Hamtramck plant near Detroit, making Chevrolet Volts and other models around the clock. 2,500 jobs. And Chrysler's celebration Tuesday when it paid back all of the government loans that kept it from shutting down 2 years ago.
And from that moment forward, we were able to take our destiny back into our hands.
Fiat believes enough in Chrysler to take majority control of the automaker. That will happen next week. The new owner providing new muscle, just as Chrysler turned its first profit in 5 years. U.S. automakers sold only about 10 million cars and trucks at the industry's low point 2 years ago. Last year improved to nearly 11.5 million. This year's projections are for nearly 13 million units. Nice progress, but still off historic highs.
We don't expect to see the industry get back to full levels of 16 million units for several years.
Not until the gridlock of too few jobs and too many foreclosed homes clears. Tony Guida, CBS News, New York.
Congress remains in formal session this holiday weekend as Republicans seek to block President Obama from making recess appointments of controversial nominees. Chief among them is consumer advocate Elizabeth Warren. Whit Johnson has more on her stormy week on Capitol Hill.
Whether it's hidden credit card fees, fraudulent mortgages, or risky dealings on Wall Street, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is supposed to be the new sheriff looking out for you. But the federal agency, which hasn't even opened its doors yet, is already controversial.
We had an agreement for the time this hearing would occur.
You're making this
you
up,
asked
Ms. Warren.
it.
Elizabeth Warren, the new bureau's chief architect, sparred with Republicans during a congressional hearing this week. President Obama chose Warren to create the agency last September, but this outspoken Wall Street critic has become a lightning rod for the opposition.
When you put this much power in one individual's hands without a check, without a balance, without being subjected to congressional appropriation on an annual basis, or even every 2 years, those things cause problems.
Congressman Patrick McHenry voted against the Bureau's creation. He and other Republicans want the position of agency director to be replaced by a bipartisan commission under the control of Congress, a move Democrats argue will kill the agency's effectiveness.
Government has been so far on the side of the big banks and big institutions and forgotten the little guy.
Congressman Elijah Cummings and a group of his colleagues have called on Congressman McHenry to apologize to Warren for his treatment of her at the hearing.
She just accused the
She's
lady
accusing me
lying.
of making an agreement that I never
I think
made.
you need to clear this up with your staff. There's a certain level of decorum and a certain level of respect.
You think that respect was broken?
Oh, no doubt about it.
I think she owes Congress an apology.
The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is supposed to be up and running by July, but it still has no director, and Senate Republicans are threatening to block any nominee. Whit Johnson, CBS News, Washington.
Coming up on tonight's CBS Evening News, help for the families of special operations soldiers who have fallen in battle. A Taliban suicide bomber wearing a police uniform blew himself up during a meeting in northern Afghanistan. Officials said 6 people were killed, including a top police commander and 2 German soldiers. The German general, who is the area NATO commander, was wounded. Since 9/11, more than 300 elite U.S. Special Operations personnel have been killed in Afghanistan and elsewhere. For their families, finding others who understand their sacrifice and grief can be difficult. Lynn Quijano reports on one organization working to change that.
It's just the way I like it. 15-year-old Andrew Mahalik remembers the last time he saw his father.
He was about to leave to go over to Afghanistan and just gave each other a high five.
In 2006, Master Sergeant Tom Mahalik was killed protecting fellow soldiers during a fierce ambush by the Taliban. A story first made public by 60 Minutes. Andrew received his father's Silver Star.
I remember just feeling like I was there for him and I didn't want to mess anything up.
Mahalik was a Green Beret based at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Special Forces teams like his can deploy at a moment's notice on classified missions they can't even discuss with their families. Good job. Leaving wives like Wendy Mahalik to do everything.
You have to not just be the mom, but you have to be the dad, and you have to be, the person that fixes the washing machine.
That look? Wendy had grown used to being apart from Tom as much as 300 days a year, making it even more difficult to accept his death.
I waited for the knock on the door and for him to come in and say, "Hey, I'm home," and it just didn't happen. I lived on post.
Wendy found support through the United Warrior Survivor Foundation. Elizabeth Brown, who's married to a Special Forces soldier, runs the organization. It was created to help widows of Special Operations personnel.
It is a very tight-knit community. We can put them together with somebody that got that life before and gets where they're at now.
Connor, are you keeping track of the time?
Molly Patton moved to North Carolina after her husband, Sergeant Major Jerry Patton, died in a training exercise in 2008. She's now raising their 4 sons alone.
Well, I'm 2 years out and I'm still saying the same thing.
You're still saying?
I'm still saying, who's going to love my boys like their dad? You can make it on time.
Now her family is adjusting, slowly.
Making sure that their needs are met emotionally and teaching boys boy stuff. And that's, I think, the hardest part for me.
It's a piece of marble that came from Afghanistan.
For Wendy, this backyard memorial reminds her that duty comes with sacrifice.
He was fighting for his country. I have to respect what he did and go on with every day.
Surviving families of America's elite special forces soldiering on. Elaine Quijano, CBS News, Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Next up on tonight's CBS Evening News, will fields of genetically modified grains put organic farmers out of business? The Agriculture Department's approval earlier this year of genetically modified alfalfa, the 4th biggest U.S. crop by acreage, has brought a flurry of lawsuits by organic farmers who feed alfalfa to their dairy cows. Seth Doan tells us why they fear for their livelihoods.
Come on, babe. Come on.
Searching for greener pastures, dairy farmer Tony Azevedo switched from conventional farming 15 years ago to an all-organic dairy. His certified organic milk turns him a higher profit, but he also has to meet much higher standards too. Today, Azevedo's big worry is keeping alfalfa hay, the best feed for producing milk, from being contaminated by nearby genetically modified or GMO crops.
If alfalfa seed gets contaminated, we're out of business.
The contamination happens when these seeds drift from one farmer's land onto another's.
If my neighbor decides to plant GMO crops or Roundup Ready alfalfa, and he has a right to, I can't tell him how to run his life. What's going to keep that contamination from my farm?
The problem? The USDA recently approved the unregulated release of Monsanto's genetically modified alfalfa, which is engineered to be resistant to the company's herbicide Roundup, a chemical that kills weeds.
We can't survive with this kind of a ruling out. It's just not right.
Azevedo and his neighbor Ward Burrows say that could put them out of business. If GMOs are discovered in the feed, prices could go up, and they could lose important organic buyers like Whole Foods.
What they've done is completely disregard the organic industry.
It's a dispute that has already resulted in huge court battles between conventional farmers and biotech companies. In the last 10 years, farmers have sued for over $1 billion in losses after rice crops meant for export were contaminated. So far, $200 million have been awarded, and 6,000 farmers await their day in court. But the U.S. Department of Agriculture believes that genetic engineering, or GE, is critical to help farmers be more productive and guard against food shortages.
I think there is a growing recognition around the world that there's going to be GE crops.
Tom Vilsack is the Secretary of Agriculture.
There's the perception out there that USDA is siding with the big biotech companies as opposed to the organic dairy farmers, the little guy.
Well, I think if you understand and appreciate what we've done in organic, it's a hard case to make, because at the end of the day, I think we need both.
Vilsack says more research is being conducted, but meanwhile, the seeds are being planted.
You're not going to know that you have it until it's too late, until they test the animals, they test the milk, and it's now in the food chain, and then it's too late.
And organic farmers can do nothing but watch and wait. Seth Doan, CBS News, Washington.
And musician, poet, and political activist Gil Scott-Heron, whose work influenced generations of rappers, died yesterday.
Because the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised.
He was best known for that song, 1970s, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. Gil Scott-Heron was 62 years old. And still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, 100 years of the Indy 500. Finally, tomorrow marks the 100th anniversary of the Indianapolis 500, a marathon race that features 33 world-class drivers in some of the fastest cars on Earth.
This is the view of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway from the passenger seat of the official pace car, around the infield and down the straightaways. The grandstands almost become a blur. The Indy 500 is a 200-lap marathon from green flag to checkered flag. Since the first race in 1911, top qualifying speeds have tripled.
The track here at Indy is 2.5 miles long. 100 years ago, the average speed here was 75 miles an hour. Last year, it was 225 miles an hour.
From a driving perspective, you know, the cars are so fast.
British driver Dan Wheldon won this race in 2005. A few years ago, he showed me what it's like inside an Indy car. 2 words: exhilarating, scary.
When you have 400,000 spectators, it's phenomenal. You've got that history, you've got a lot of traditions.
One tradition has the winner drinking milk, not champagne, in Victory Lane.
This car won the 1957 race, but
Donald Davidson is the Speedway historian, looking after a third of the winning Indy cars at the Speedway Museum.
the 64 winner is the last front engine winner.
Indy cars evolved from the Model T age to the space age. Engines moved to the rear. Steering wheels got smaller.
In this, you're practically on your back.
Oh, wow.
And
the car's more aerodynamic and computer designed.
And here it comes, Mario, the checkered flag of victory.
Mario Andretti led Indy 11 times, but won only once in 1969.
I think probably if it was 400 miles, I probably would have won it 6 times.
Elio Castroneves has won.
Brazilian driver Elio Castroneves has won the 500 3 times in the past decade.
There is nothing and no better feeling when you finish the turn 4 and see that checker flag come at you.
Start your engines.
When this 100th anniversary race does start, 82-year-old Joe Romack will be in the grandstand for the 50th time.
What is it about this place that keeps you coming back?
It's a combination of things. It's the speed, the technical advancements, and the wheel-to-wheel racing.
A pilgrimage for race fans, many of whom kiss the last original bricks of the century-old track.
The 500 mile is the Camelot of automobile racing. It is the pinnacle.
One other big change since 1911, women. 4 women are in tomorrow's race, including Danica Patrick, who finished 3rd in 2009. And that is the CBS Evening News. Later on CBS, 48 Hours Mystery. Thanks for joining us this Saturday evening. I'm Russ Mitchell, CBS News in New York. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Good night.